This only has been first 7 weeks of 2025, but wow, oh wow. Have they been eventful or what? I am sitting here in February and feel that the world is spinning around me, not just Russia, the entire world. And in Russia, the things are, how would I put it? Insane. The economy, the politics, the society, it is insane. It is the time of change. Everything is changing very fast. I have seen this very same situation when the USSR was falling apart, and the history is repeating itself in Russia. Well, the most insane news this week comes from, well, about China. It is China. China has been dominating Russian political economic landscape. Well, things are changing. Howdy, howdy, friends. My name is Konstantin, and welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. Welcome to Weekends. I give you crazy news update straight out of the mad circus that Russia unfortunately has become. But first things first, there's no such absurdity that could not be realized in Russia these days. Please remember that. And the news I call crazy news from Russia. The news of Russia that matter and that you will not find anywhere in the mainstream media. I'd like to do something different today. I would like to, well, I usually select a dozen or so news that I find dramatically important. The news that you can't find in your country's mainstream media anywhere. But this time I'm going to divide all the news into two distinct blocks. One block is the economy, and the second block is the society, because the most changes are happening in these areas, in the economy and in the society. Both areas are undergoing tremendous and fast changes. In the past couple of years, those changes were happening behind the curtains, so to speak, and now they are on the surface, visible. And before, they weren't that strong, at least we didn't see them. Right now, they are turbulent. Anyone in Russia can see, touch, and smell them. And most of these news are not pretty. Let me start with the news in the economy. Let me start with the picture first. It is a photograph of the Russian stock market on February 13th. Green. The stock of most Russian companies is up here in green. The picture, again, is from February 13, when Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin and outlined America's willingness to negotiate on Ukraine. Without Ukraine and Europe, or should I say, America's willingness to bail Russia out, that also is a way to put it. Well, this is what happened right after. The markets reacted, and you are seeing the reaction right here. This is what one telephone call from Donald Trump could do to put entire country Russia into an optimistic celebration mode. Well, we all know what followed. The statements from the American administration that are actually hard to believe, the meeting in Saudi Arabia, the alienation of Europe. Russia, the country, is still celebrating. People, including politicians, are still feeling intoxicated because for the first time in 3 years, they see some kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, take a look at a different picture. Check this out right here. This is the same stock market right here, the same companies. This is only a little different. That's what a few days make such a great difference. This Thursday. Why? Well, isn't it's all in red, isn't it? You know, look, the same companies. That's what they were before. And this is what they are after. Why? I wanted to show you these two pictures that kind of show you the volatility. One day everything goes up by 5%, 10%. Next day everything is down. It's because you can't fool the money people, the investors who trade stock. Even if the USA lifts the sanctions tomorrow, it's unthinkable, but we are seeing unthinkable becoming a reality now. So if the USA lifts all sanctions and allows to trade Russia, and even starts providing financial aid to Russia, no. Russian economy is at the point of no return. It's going down, down, down. For one simple reason. The damage, so much damage has been done, and Russian model of economy is simply not sustainable. And you know what? This is the proof right here. Take a very good look. This is Russian economic reality. The next news is fines. Russians are fined for buying cars from foreigners for cash now. I have said it many times that to improve financial situation, Russian government will start putting its greasy hand deeper and deeper into people's pockets. We have been seeing that all throughout 2024, but it's getting bad. It's getting much worse. Russian citizens now, and this is an absolutely crazy fine, but they try to invent every single way possible. Now, Russian citizens are facing fines for up to 40% of the transaction amount for paying for a car in cash if the seller is a foreigner. According to federal law 173 FZ, such payments must go through a bank only. A resident of Moscow, and it's a real case, it made the news. A resident of Moscow who bought a car for 2.85 million rubles, $28,500 roughly, already lost 900,000 rubles, $9,000, because the buyer violated this requirement to make payments through banks only. Drivers are now advised to check the seller's status and use non-cash payment to avoid sanctions fines. This is a prime example of how the government is trying to squeeze people out of money, and the amounts are pretty large. Now, this fine is something I've never even heard before. I've never seen anything like that. Well, it is Russia 2025. India and China have suspended the purchase of Russian oil. It is now unprofitable for them. The cost of freight for tankers that were not sanctioned increased by several $million, while the premium for Russian oil increased from $3 to $5 per barrel. Against this background, importers suspended the purchase of oil for delivery in March. This isn't good. Um, well, things aren't good in general, but this is extra no good for Russia because it still sells oil, but in lesser and lesser quantities. The less oil it sells, and oil is Russia's biggest and main bread maker. So the less of a bread maker it sells, the more budget deficit it has. Another news is the topic they are trying to avoid talking about in Russia. This is kind of topic non grata. Natural population decline in Russia increased by 20%. Again, natural population decline in Russia increased by 20%. It is both of the change in the economy and the society. That's why I'm putting it into the economic news. It is the demographic crisis, a full blown catastrophe for the country. Russia will be dying out, not because of the enemies of the country, not because of um, sickness and things like that, pandemics, but because of natural causes. Very, very simple thing to explain. People simply don't want to have kids. By the end of 2024, the natural decline of Russian population, that's the difference between the number of deaths and births, amounted to 596,000 people. Such data is provided by Russia's statistics agency Rosstat. It means that might be a little bit, well, a lot, cooked. And most likely, in reality, things are worse. But even if we take 596,000 people decline, that's pretty darn bad. This number is 20.4% higher than 2023. That we're seeing the increase, and that's huge. Um, the number of newborns in 2024 continued to decline and reached 1.2 million, which is 3.4% less than in 2023. A lower birth rate was recorded only in 1999, when, a little over 1.2 million children were born. The fertility rate, the number of births per 1,000 people, decreased from 8.7 in 2023 to 8.4 in 2024. Last year, there were very few Russian provinces, such as Chechnya, Dagestan, Ingushetia, Kabardino-Balkaria, North Ossetia, that had increase in birth. Everyone else went in decline. I wonder why. Why is that so? You can't really write it down to the enemies of Russia that surround the country. You can't write it to the foreign agents. You can't write it to those folks who ran away from Russia, fled, escaped, whatever. You can't blame Ukrainians, Who can you blame? No one. And that's why this topic is not talked about in Russia. It's a taboo, non grata. And it is very simple to explain. People don't have money. People don't have hope for the future. People don't have confidence that the families can actually survive and prosper. And this is what you get when you wage a war in your neighbors. Next news. Actually, the next news is layoffs and living standard. Poverty, welcome to Russia. Massive layoffs of medical staff in Krasnoyarsk province reported. The reason for the layoffs? Very simple, transparent, black and white, lack of funding. There are no money to pay people salaries. According to some industry insiders, well, people who know what's going on inside the Ministry of Health, um, staffing table has now been drawn up and sent for the approval by Natalia Gavarukhina, the Minister of Health of the province. This is sort of the master plan for the year. Um, it outlines the financial side of medical care, and not just in one province, but in every province. But we have some inside information about this particular province. So the Minister of Health made the big plan, and the new schedule provides for closure of small medical clinics in villages with fewer than 100 people. Usually there's a little room with one, either a doctor or a nurse or a medic professional. No more. So the schedule also provides for layoffs of nurses, medical workers, and other staff. It is handsomely called optimization. It will affect all Norilsk hospitals and Archansk Hospital, where it is planned to reduce, well, that's how they call it, reduce, more than 150 nurses and shut down some departments with doctors, nurses, and other staff. Also, it was decided to close down the maternity hospital number 6 in Krasnoyarsk. Well, it makes sense. People don't have babies anymore, right? So that maternity hospital number 6 is a part of the city clinical hospital number 20. I'm just giving you an example. Numbers, facts, and figures for one province. This is what I've been talking for the last 2 years. The economic tsunami of Russia. It is one of the phases of this tsunami. This is exactly what it looks like. It's not hypothetical, something happened in Russia. No, tsunami is the lack of money and falling living standard, okay? There's not enough money in the federal budget to pay all employees, and there are first victims. We're seeing them right now in another province, in Kuzbas. It's, well, how do I say that? It's having, I'm trying to put it mildly, big financial problems because the entire province depends on coal extractions and exports to China. Well, you know what? China isn't buying anymore. And the entire province is just collapsing financially, and there are laying off en masse kindergarten teachers there. In Krasnoyarsk, they're laying off doctors, nurses, medical staff. Just these two examples. But all 89 provinces of Russia are going through the very same procedure of optimization. I knew that, and I was sharing this information with you in September of the last year. I told you of layoffs coming to Russia for one simple reason. It was clear from the federal budget for 2025 that the parliament approved and the president signed in October. Now we are just seeing it happening, materializing. And if you hear anyone telling you how gloriously Russian economy doing, just point all those hundreds, perhaps thousands of nurses and medical workers from Krasnoyarsk province and other provinces and tell these people, well, ask them, what do they think of that? Is that a sign of a healthy, striving economy or what? Moving on to truckers. Fines for truckers will be increased by 4 times, 400%, amid complaints to Vladimir Putin about erroneous charges. See, there's a big problem right now. Well, the parliament has just approved a bill increasing fines from 5,000 rubles to 20,000 rubles. That's from somewhere $50 to $200 for non-payment of travel. This year, drivers received 1.5 million fines, and the system regularly crashes due to electronic warfare protection from drones. You see what happens. Um, Russian trucks, by law, are obliged to pay the state for every kilometer, every mile they travel. And they have mandatory devices installed on every truck, and devices keep track of where the truck goes and how many miles it puts on and so forth. But then, as trucks travel in the western part of Russia, where the drone attacks from Ukraine are quite frequent, so therefore, Russian armed forces or whoever is responsible for the protection, they enable these systems that make all the communication devices go dead. And therefore, that also influences the truckers. All of a sudden, those devices don't work. And then when they go online, truckers get fined for, shutting off those devices, but it's not their fault. The amount of erroneous fines reach from 200 to 300,000 rubles um, for each truck. That's 20 to 30,000, $2,000 to $3,000, and that forced truckers to appear to Putin with a request to right the wrongdoing. Instead, they are receiving 400% fine increase. That's the answer from Vladimir Putin. That's how he rights the wrongdoings. There's another bad news for Russian people. Russians now face evictions and confiscations of their property, real estate, private property, for utility debts. Starting 2025, the law has become stricter. If debt for utilities is from 200 to 300,000 rubles, that's from $2,000 to $3,000, court may put up the debtor's property for sale. Part of the amount will be used to pay off the debt, and the rest will be returned to former owner of such property. And that scheme is a magnet for different corruption schemes because court orders a specific company that sells properties, and who it sells to, it's a big question. So Russian people are facing another problem, I don't know, another disaster. Another news is from elevators. I've called you to pay attention to elevators in Russia. Dozens of thousands have aged and there's no funds to finance their replacement. That is not news. It's been admitted by Russian authorities many times, and it's been a subject of the news in my updates a couple times. Enough funds to finance the war in Ukraine they have in Russia, but not enough funds to replace old elevators. How convenient. Well, elevators started falling down, and another elevator fell this past week. An elevator carrying a woman fell in a building on Elektrozavodskaya Street. I think the right pronouncement is Elektrozavodskaya, okay, in the east of Moscow. The victim was conscious when the paramedics arrived. She was hospitalized, but her fate is unknown because the media has been silent. They don't want to talk about these cases. They don't want them to become public. No. This is the sugarcoating that is still going on. They can't sugarcoat the numbers any longer because people go to stores and they see how much things cost around them, but they sugarcoat these things. Another news is oil companies have warned of shortages of gasoline in the near future due to the chaos in Russian railways. Traffic problems and sanctions are making it difficult to transport fuel, oil, more So far, more than 396,000 tons of fuel, or most of that for the domestic market, is stuck in the railroad somewhere in the vastness of Russia. This creates risks of supply disruption and may force refineries to reduce capacity. Well, you know what? The Ukrainians have been reducing the capacity of Russian refineries a great deal recently. And, you know, now they facing another problem. The priority of military transportation is ag- making the situation worse. Well, my Russian friends, comrades, citizens, get ready for fuel shortages. Coming to the pump near you. Little bit about real world inflation in Russia. Megaphone, telecommunication operator, basically owner, one of the big three owner of mobile communication in Russia, an equivalent of Sprint in the USA, let's put it this way, has increased prices for communication services by an average of 20% in February. 20%. The increase occurred just a week ago. Other telecom companies are expecting to do the same. 20% up. Nice. Real world inflation for you. Something you can't really sugarcoat. I mean, you can, but at the end, people get the bill and they have to pay it. Next, you'll remember what happened with two oil tankers in the Black Sea. They broke apart. In the Black Sea, soon to be renamed to the Russian Sea, 500 metric tons of oil spilled into the Black Sea. The perpetrators of the environmental disaster in the Black Sea were severely punished this past week. It's been a couple months, and of course, there was a proper investigation done, and it was concluded. Case went to court, and the court, arbitration court of the Krasnodar province, where the oil leaks occurred, made the decision. Now, before I tell you the verdict, I want to remind you what the heck happened in the Black Sea. 5,000 metric ton of oil spilled, still all over the beaches on the Sea of Azov, on the Black Sea. Still in the sea. Birds and sea animals are still dying. Fish is greatly affected. Dolphins are affected. People who live near beaches are affected. Hard to breathe a lot, have developed cases of asthma, heart, difficulties breathing. I mean, I don't have to explain you or remind you what an oil spill is, right? Huge, huge disaster. Perhaps one of the worst natural disaster, not natural, man-made disasters in Russia in the past 20 years. Well, the arbitration court of Krasnodar province made a decision. Uh, a fair decision. The court has imposed 300,000 ruble fine on the owner of Volganeft 239 tanker. That tanker spilled close to 5,000 ton of fuel into the Black Sea. 300,000 rubles. That is $3,000. I know. No, I did not make a mistake. 300,000 rubles in fines. That is $3,000. For all that oil spilled, for all those things that affected life of people and animals and fish, the court decided that Volga Transneft, that's the company, violated the requirements of the technical regulations. That's true. Definitely violated. $3,000 fine. The defendant, in his defense, stated that the crash, this disaster, occurred due to a wind wave load, a sort of force majeure, and it's not defendant's fault. The charterer is to blame for the disaster, who delayed unloading the tanker, although the ship owner warned about the worsening weather conditions and tried to quickly get the tanker out of dangerous waters. And who is the charterer? Igor Sechin's Rosneft oil company, Russia's largest oil company. Who is Igor Sechin? I'll remind you, he's Putin's one of his best trusted friends. They come together from early 90s from St. Petersburg. Igor Sechin has always been Putin's adjutant. Now he owns one of the world's largest oil companies. And the charterer is responsible for such a huge disaster and gets away with a $3,000 fine. The charterer hires all dangerous vessels unintended for maritime transportation of petroleum products in seas. They are designed for rivers. Then the charterer creates conditions for an environmental disaster. And then it gets away with $3,000 fine. Because all the bodies, all people responsible for supervision and officials closed their eyes in fear and didn't even want to make a sound in Sechin's direction. And this is the result. Billions of rubles in damage. So much real estate has been damaged. So many people have lost livelihood, businesses. So many animals, birds have died. Billions of rubles and so much life punished by a $3,000 fine. Russian people have picked up the bill once again. And this is my prediction. Russian people will be picking up the bills from now on for a very long time. And the bills are going to be high. The next news is very important. I've reported this already, but I want to stress it once again. Russian government has begun to prepare for the economic crisis, a big one. The Russian authorities have resumed the work of the special industry commissions to support more than 2,000 enterprises in deep financial troubles. I'll remind you what these industry commissions are. It's basically bodies of the government that are given power to control private companies, to make decisions for private companies. Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak warned of risks, including loss of investment activity. Coal companies have been hit the hardest and first. That's what I've been saying. They have already suffered 80 billion rubles in losses, and they desperately need a bailout. And metallurgy and forest wood and pulp industry are also in line for the support. They require bailout as well. This is an undeniable sign of the deep crisis in Russian economy. The economic tsunami. Folks, again, if you hear anyone telling you that Russian economy is going strong and circumventing sanctions, you tell them of these industry commissions. You tell them of the coal industry in Kuzbas. You tell them of pulp and wood industry. and you tell them of ferrous, non-ferrous metals, metallurgy. What do they think of that? Ooh. Before moving to the news from about the economy, from the economy to the society, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you. Thank you all. Um, Thank you for watching this news update right now. Thank you for liking, and please like if you haven't done so. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for sending me wonderful messages, for praying with me and for me. Thank you for your love. Thank you, those of you who bought me coffees at buymeacoffee.com, who supported via Patreon and PayPal. Your support shows me that you value my work highly. Just know that inspires me and gives me energy to move forward. Demonetized or monetized, it doesn't matter. I will continue moving forward. Thank you for your kindness, help, support, and inspiration. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. The next news, a block of news, is about society. And at the end, I'm going to summarize what I witness is happening in Russia, and of course, the news of China. That is insane. Um, the next news is about crime rate in Russia. The former interior minister, read the chief of federal police, Anatoly Kulikov, this guy, who served as the chief of Russia's entire police force from 1995 to 1998, has urged Russians to prepare for a hike in crime after the war in Ukraine ends. I know Anatoly Kulikov personally. Yes, I know this guy. And I have met him on several occasions long after he left the force. He is a businessman now, a very wealthy man. He owns lots of properties and lots of businesses. And he said that this crime hike was also the case in the early years of the Great Patriotic War. Well, that's how Russians called World War II, when gangs and organized crime groups operated in the USSR in late 40s and early 50s. Kulikov emphasized that in addition to military personnel, those who have been incarcerated and released from prisons will also return to the country after the war. And I fully agree with Anatoly Kulikov. I have said that many times. I personally don't like the guy, but he has a clear mind and he talks common sense. I have been forecasting the same thing for 2 years now. And not just my forecasts. There have been signs of increased criminal activity already. This is the information from my former Friday news updates. For example, I reported on the signs like the increase in sales of security systems, security cameras, guns, illegal guns. Now it's very easy to buy guns in Russia. That's strictly illegal, but it's become cheap because they're dime a dozen these days. I have reported that more and more armed people are seen by everyone, and police doesn't even respond. They're afraid. Okay, so I agree with Kulikov. We're waiting for a huge spike in crime rate in Russia. I have this one theory. All right, I think that somehow Russian state will put those people who it released from prisons and pardoned back to prisons. I don't know how. I really don't, but let's listen to Anatoly Kulikov. The next news of Russia's church. It's an interesting situation here. And you know what? I must apologize. I've been, I think, overly critical of Russian church lately. Well, it's hard not to be critical when you see how Russian priests sanctify missiles called Satana, the Satan. But you know what? I think I went a little too far. So I apologize. There are good priests in Russia. I'm going to show you one of them right now. There was a very large DSC meeting last week in the Russian church among the very top priests. And the priests were talking of patriotism. Priest Alexei Shlyapin stood up and made himself heard. I quote, this is what the good priest said. I do not agree with such patriotic trend in the church relations. It is the duty of a priest to lead people to the kingdom of heaven, not to engage in patriotism. Check this out. That's the good priest speaking, what I quoted.
Идите, сядьте и серьезно подумайте обо всем том, что вы сейчас тут ляпнули.
The head of this meeting is the Russia's chief priest, Kirill, Patriarch Kirill. And this was filmed by a cell phone as a covert film, so to speak, there was no official information in the church or anywhere in the news, just this record. And thank to the person who actually wrote it. Otherwise, we would not never know that there are good priests in Russia. No. Patriarch Kirill chastised priest Alexei Shlyapin. I quote Kirill. Oh, he was sarcastic. That's great. This is the first time I've heard of this. Are you from the Western Ukraine by any chance? Go and sit down and think seriously about what you just blurted out there. Again, that was a response to the high priest of Russia, who said that he disagreed with such patriotic trend in the church. He said that it is his duty to lead people to the kingdom of heaven, not to engage in patriotism. And he was Are you from the Western Ukraine by any chance? What is Western Ukraine, hell now? I personally know quite a few people from the Western Ukraine. It was never a crime to know people from there, and they're fantastic, fantastic human beings. This is the first time I've heard this, says Kirill. He responds to the priests saying that his role is to lead people to kingdom of heaven, not to engage in patriotism. That is the first time I've heard of this, says the head of Russia's church. Go and sit down and think seriously about what you have blurted out there. Folks, I find it odd. I've heard that many times before, that priest's duty, any priest, not just Russian church priest, including Russia Eastern Orthodox Church, so the priest's duty is to connect people with God and lead them to the kingdom of heaven. I'm not a priest. I've heard that so many times. And the grand priest, Kirill, heard that for the very first time. I mean, don't you find it odd? The guy who served God has served God all his life. Just heard that the role of a priest to lead people to the kingdom of heaven, he heard it for the first time. Is he really a priest? Did he study? Did he read Bible? Did he? I am confused. What's your opinion? Are you with me and the good priest, or with Kirill? Do you think that church's role is to lead people to the kingdom of heaven, or to engage in patriotism? Please let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear your opinion. Thank you. By the way, there will be many more news like that coming out in the upcoming weeks and months in Russia. And if you want to keep up with other breaking news from Russia, please consider becoming patron of Inside Russia. Because every single day I carefully select and post 9 news that I find important with my commentaries and analysis. I will keep you informed on everything you wanted to know about Russia, but didn't know where to ask. Become patron at patreon.com and get access to the news that matter. I'm going to put the link down below after this stream ends. So please go check it out. Consider becoming patron. The next news is amusing. Well, the next 3 news are amusing. The state, Russian parliament, has proposed to investigate the Queen of Denunciations. Yes, there is a Queen of Denunciations in Russia. Her name was Ekaterina Mizulina. She's on the left. So, Russian parliament started looking into Mizulina for possible foreign influence. Ekaterina Mizulina is a very famous person in Russia. She is the head of a public organization that has grants from Russian government, and it's called the League of Free Internet. Ekaterina Mizulina's mother is a very influential senator, and her daughter is, Ekaterina is running the show with internet in Russia. She is known for writing hundreds of denunciations. Based on those denunciations, there have been many criminal cases opened, and people went to prison. Okay. Senator Davankov, to the right, I'll remind you, he was a runner-up in the president's elections in Russia a few months ago. So he suggested that Mizulina's recent actions were too strongly influenced by the new administration in the US. I quote the senator. Yesterday, she defended Russian internet at the expense of the budget Russian taxpayers, and today she praises American social media. As for me, this raises concerns about her possible foreign influence, and I am against the practice of denunciation. However, Ekaterina, who has herself best known for denouncing musicians and bloggers in the past, is a special case. I end quote. A very amusing situation. For 3 years, Ekaterina Mizulina, 3 years, 2.9 years, she was fine. She was all over media. She was touring Russia, getting audiences of students, speaking in front of them. She was feared. Many senators actually mentioned her many times. Her mother is a senator, heavyweight senator, by the way. And it was in the past. It was going on for 3 years. And now, all of a sudden, it turns out she might have been under influence of the USA all this time. You see, friends, that's how it works in Russia. The next news comes from Rostov-on-Don, the city where I grew up and I was raised. The Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture has been suffered a blow. The minister, former Minister of Agriculture now, um, of Rostov province, Konstantin Rachalovsky has been arrested. The charges at this time are unknown, but most likely it's corruption, taking a bribe. He is another high ranked official arrested in Rostov. The Minister of Finance first, the Minister of Transportation, and the Prosecutor General Office has already requested the Russian Parliament to lift immunity of the former Governor Golubev twice. You see, the former Governor Golubev was appointed to the upper chamber of the parliament right after he resigned as the governor, and he received immunity from the criminal prosecution by default because every senator member of the upper house gets immunity. And I think that was his deal. I resign as the governor, but I get immunity. Both times, twice already, Parliament refused to lift the immunity of Golubev. On top of that, there is another arrest. Another top officer of the Russian National Guard, Rosguardia, has been arrested and charged with corruption. A criminal case has been opened against the deputy commander of the Central District of Russian National Guard for armament, Major General Konstantin Rybych. All these cases, Mizulina, Golubev, Rybych, and there are more cases not as high profile. They illustrate how the spiders have started devouring each other. Well, at this point, they're attacking each other. They are inside the system. You see, before the war, before all this mess in Russia, they were coexisting peacefully because of there was enough money for all of them. And now they are attacking each other. And it is a sign of growing political instability in the high elite circles. The pie is shrinking. There's not so much money for them any longer. Far from eruption, the situation, but the mercury is definitely rising. The vertical of power doesn't seem that solid any longer. Well, let's not get our hopes high. It might take quite a long time for them to actually start real wars against each other. But you see, we're already seeing some commotion. Employees of large public and private companies have stopped receiving mobilization immunity. Before, in large companies, especially those owned or controlled by the state, and most large companies are actually either owned or controlled by the state. So in before the new employees were recruited and given immunity from mobilization. The parliament ruled that the issued immunities will render invalid on March 21st, 2025. And that brings us to a very interesting question. Why? Why, for over 2 years, large companies were allowed to give immunities? And why now immunities are rendered not valid? If some logic is applied, this is the picture. Before, Russian economy was running on reserves. For 3 years, it had accumulated so much money in the savings account in the Foundation Fund of National Welfare that it allowed Russian economy to stay afloat. It's like the Titanic who hit the iceberg, but for some time was still floating. But, no more floating. No more money. All money is gone. Going down. Bad. Big time. And in 2025, well, actually started in the last months of 2024, large companies, uh, for 3 years, many companies were doing business as usual because economy was still afloat. Okay, they kept on employing people. If some even tried to expand, especially those with military contracts from the state. Okay, that they were swimming in money. And the immunity was a bonus to attract new employees. But now the tide has changed. They are firing people. All these large companies, Sber, Rosneft, large banks, etc., they are doing massive layoffs. At the same time, what if the prices, uh, you know, of everything keep on going up? What if the peace is not achieved soon? Now, immunities are off. No one is immune after March 21st. And then there is no peace. And, do you put things together? Do you smell this word? You know, that big word that starts with M, mobilization. I will speak of that in the upcoming streams. I have some insight on Russian mobilization. At least some people think of what's going to happen. And I will present it in a live stream dedicated just to possible mobilization. The next news comes from Russia's north, Yakutsk. Yakutsk province parliament has supported cancellation of direct mayoral elections. 25 out of 29 local senators, well, deputies, participated in voting. 20 of them voted yes for the cancellation, and three of them voted no, and two abstained. The majority of the deputies are the members of Putin's party called United Russia, Единая Россия. So the deputies of Yakutsk parliament for the second time supported the bill of the abolition of direct directions. The previous vote was held in November of 2022, and at that time, the initiative was returned for revision by the Parliament of the Republic. Today, on February the 18th, 23rd, pardon me, 22nd, in Uzbekistan, it's already 23rd, and I guess where you are at right now, it's the 22nd. Today, on February 22nd, the deputies have approved the final document. Now, the mayor of Yakutsk is voted by the people. People have the say. But soon the candidates for the position of the mayor will be determined based on the results of political competition. And the deputies will vote for the candidates to choose Yakutsk mayor. So people will have no say. The head of the republic, the former mayor of Yakutsk, Aysen Nikolaev, said that in the condition of the war declared by Western countries on Russia, the refusal of the ban cancellation of direct elections does not contradict with basic democratic principles. I have thought of this same statement quite some time. So there are democratic principles, basic democratic principles, right? And if there's no war, then banning, well, canceling direct elections actually does contradict the basic economic principles. But if there's a war declared by Western countries on Russia, then this cancellation does not contradict the basic democratic principles. It doesn't, does it? Well, that's a perfect case of Russian logic, Putin's logic. Now, to me, this news is very important. It's probably one of the most important news, although it's fairly small. Yakutsk, middle of nowhere, far away, small, not too many people live there. Yakutsk is fairly small town, you know. It shows how Russia has been turned into totalitarianism. Yakutsk is not the first city without people voting for mayor, but rather mayor being selected by a few deputies, the members of one party, Putin's party. This has been going on for a long time, for over 20 years. It all started with the governors. Before people decided who would be the governor in Russian provinces, but Vladimir Putin changed them. He started appointing governors, and the mayors and everyone else have followed. This how what's going on in Russia has been going on for a long time. Step by step, stepping stones. Some call it boiling the frog. They are changing the country. They're changing the system. They take away right after right after right. Friends, look at Russia and be scared of how fast your country can go to hell. Look how fast Russia has gone to hell. It all starts with one small step, sold to everyone as for the safety and security and convenience of citizens. But guess what? Those who choose safety and security and convenience over freedom, they deserve neither safety nor security. Friends, please, I dare you, double dare you, triple dare you, don't let that happen to your country. Please. The next news is, well, music to my ears. Russian parliament demanded to play Russian songs in public places, on radio, and on TV. The proposal was made by the senator Boris Chernyshov. I heard that music before. Literally, in the USSR. Only Soviet songs were allowed. There weren't any other songs. I barely heard any foreign songs. Only one question. Why do Russian people want that back? Why? Alright, before we move to the last news about China, I would like to ask you a favor. Please let me know what you think of the news selection today. Please comment down below. Pick one news, or two or three, the ones you like the most, and let me know which ones. Uh, why do you like them? What do you like? Perhaps you dislike something. Let me know. Feedback is very important. Thank you. So now I'd like to give you a short summary. Economy, we finally start seeing the science, you see. Before was a theory, but now we have real application of the tsunami. It can be seen everywhere. And even don't hear the news of, uh, you know, the, those who are saying that Russian economy is circumventing. I actually don't hear them that much these days. This demise is intensifying. It's already fast, but it's intensifying. The bigger changes are happening in the society. People are getting angrier. They are losing. Um, they're losing understanding of what the hell is going on because the government is changing the narrative of propaganda, and that's actually a, now. Let me tell you, China. This is the last news is with a Chinese accent. It's actually unbelievable. Right now, as you know, some of you might know, it's New Year. Happy New Year, the Chinese New Year. Russia and China are close friends, you know, that's you've heard so many times, from Putin himself. You heard it many times from Vladimir Putin. And he traveled to China quite a few times. He invited Xi Jinping to Russia. China and Russia are friends, friends, friends. And all Russian officials followed the suit. Some even went extra miles, extra kilometers. Check this out. This is Amur's province. This is the governor of Amur province.
俄罗斯和中国有着深厚的友好关系，并且我们非常珍惜这份友谊。我仅代表阿姆州人民，并以我个人的名义，祝大家春节快乐，祝身体健康，万事如意。
Guess what this guy is doing? He's congratulating the Chinese with a New Year. Happy New Year, my Chinese friends. I wish you happiness. I wish you all the best. I wish you fantastic celebration. I wish health to your elderly. I wish you study well. And then this Russian folks, obviously it's propaganda, you know, they're hired to do that. They're dancing and they're speaking Chinese, saying, "We Russians, we congratulate you with a have a great year, our Chinese friends. Wishing you all the best to your students." And this is Russian pensioners. Oh boy, look at that! They're so rich, nice clothing and everything. You know, family, good families, joy in families, and this wonderful fellows wishing good friends and. You know, it's music playing, all of that. That's a Russian governor. Not Ministry of Foreign Affairs, nothing like that. That's Russian governor. Actually, you might recall this video from 1 year ago. I made a video about at the same time saying, look at this. I can't believe that actually a governor of Amur province is doing this. You just don't do that, okay? All right. All of a sudden, 1 year later, there is a wind of change. The methodology of propaganda is rapidly changing. Now, I'm going to play you a video and I'm going to translate that fella who is speaking as a guest of Russia's major TV channel.
Очень сильно расстроило, это празднование китайского Нового года. Давайте...
I will be pausing and translating. So, I'm very disappointed in celebrating Chinese New Year in Russia.
Дадимся вопросом, уместно ли
Let's ask ourselves a question.
иностранные национальные праздники, тем более так пышно, когда...
Let's ask ourselves a question. Can we celebrate foreign countries' holidays in such a vivid way
У нас идет специальная военная операция.
when we're having, and he wants to say a war a couple times, but then he catches himself and says, the special military operation.
А вот смотрите, большинство дронов, которые используют ВСУ, они китайского происхождения.
Oh, look at this. Think about that. The majority of drones that Ukrainian army is using against us are made in China.
Китайские дроны, да, и тысячи китайских дронов убивают наших солдат.
Thousands of Chinese drones are killing our soldiers.
На одной чаше весов и кровь наших солдат и наших людей на другой чаше весов. Китайские фонари.
Says red ornaments from China, you know, on one side, and the blood of our soldiers on the other side. What is more important to us? The blood of our boys, our soldiers, or, you know, this Chinese ornaments for celebration? What's the attitude towards our, you know, fallen ones? The Chinese are striking us financially. They have been refusing our payments for many months now. Folks, this is the first time I'm hearing an official saying that.
платежи. Китайцы отказались поставлять оборудование для Arctic SPG-2.
The Chinese have refused to supply us equipment for a new port, Arctic SPG-2, for the liquefied natural gas.
Разорвали контракт.
They breached the contract.
Тем самым просто закрывая проект. Китайцы
They closed the project by their actions.
сейчас отказываются покупать нашу нефть после нового пакета санкций.
The Chinese are refusing to buy our oil after the new package of the sanctions.
А мы китайский Новый год. Был
And we are celebrating the Chinese New Year.
низкопоклонство перед Западом, сейчас что? Низкопоклонство перед Китаем, Востоем, да. То есть мы что? Вассалы?
So we were kissing boots of the West, and now we are kissing the boots of China.
Мы улус Орды,
Are we vassals of China?
мы уезд Китая.
Are we a part of China? Are we a province of China?
Все-таки суверенная страна, собственные права
Or perhaps we're a sovereign country with our own
и собственными традициями.
traditions and history.
Китай-то продвигают.
Why is Kitai being promoted?
Потому что это очень потребительская культура. Бога
Because it's a very consumer-oriented culture.
нет. Да, у Китая нет Бога.
Chinese do not have God.
А зато вот культура жрать и
The culture of eat, indulge in food, overeat,
заниматься сексом, там это нормально.
and have sex. That's normal for China.
То есть это вот продвигается везде.
And this is being eating and having sex is in having no God is being promoted in Russia. This Chinese values.
Вот это очень такая приземленная потребительская культура.
This is very consumeristic culture.
А вся эта китайская мудрость, там Конфуций и прочее,
And all this Chinese so-called wisdom, Confucius,
это, ну, мягко скажем, это не для нас, это просто сотрясание воздуха.
this is not for us. This is just nothing. It's a bunch of empty air.
Потому что она неприменима
Because you cannot apply these things.
к нам и к ним тоже. Да, потому что
And it doesn't apply to us, and it doesn't apply to them.
они не следуют.
They're not following those wisdoms. Now, friends, this has been Alexander Losev, a member of the board of the Council on Foreign and Defense Policy of Russian Federation, an official of the highest caliber. When I heard him speak live on Russian TV, I actually could not believe it. That is against everything I had heard before. Before, China was a friend. China was a great country. China was a savior of Russia. China was our closest ally, military ally, partner. We kissed with the Chinese. We did this. Again, I want to show you this. Happy holidays. All of this stuff, officially. And now, all of a sudden, this is, you see how much red? Because that's the Chinese color for New Year celebration. And all of a sudden, this red, it turns out to be blood of Russian soldiers. This is the blood of Russian soldiers. And it's not coming from me, friends. It's coming from Alexander Losev, Russia's official. Wow. Just wow. And you know what? He was the first official who came out with statement like this, with this statement, shocking statement. And then others, all of a sudden, has stopped talking favorably of China. like China, well, it's not like it doesn't exist, but they've taken pause, and couple experts, couple propaganda, well, so-called experts, propaganda people, they started criticizing China a bit. I think they're all waiting to get the narrative, the order from the Kremlin on what happens next with China. But clearly, at this point, China is not a friend. It's an enemy. It's helping our enemies militarily, and it's not helping us, not buying our oil, has shut down our banks and so forth. China, all of a sudden, is a traitor, a soulless country inhabited by atheists and sexaholics. Wow. It's definitely a new direction for Russian propaganda. And this is why I said earlier that a lot of Russian people start feeling confused. They have been brainwashed, conditioned into thinking that it's the evil West that the root of all problems of Russia. The evil West, the Satanists led by the USA. And now, all of a sudden, the USA is turning out to be a friend, a partner. And Lavrov is coming out and says the Russia's semi-god, the second after Putin, comes out and says, you know what? We never said the USA was bad. USA is a great country, and Russia is a great country. We two great countries, we divide the world again. We work with each other. We're friends. Unfortunately, we stopped communicating 3 years ago, but that was an unfortunate mistake. Now we are to right it, to right the wrong. And another official comes out and says it's China. China is the enemy. I don't know. This is like out of 1984. Only it's really happening. I am not confused. I understand what's going on, but I am outraged. I can't sit and look at this quietly. I am Russian after all. I'm not just a guy who provides the news and so forth. I'm a citizen first. And looking at this is just incredibly bad. Well, you know what? China is not going to take it lightly. China is not going to sit still. And the rumors have it that the Chinese are watching closely what Russian officials say, and they are outraged. And, the first actions of China followed. The Chinese railways began to refuse to transport some goods to Russia. Now, what will Russia do if it stops receiving goods from China? It's going to be a collapse of everything. Not a disaster, not economic crisis, an instant collapse of everything because Russia doesn't produce much. A new challenge for Russian importers. They are having difficulty shipping goods from China by rail. The new year has arrived in China and it placed new restrictions. At least this is how the Chinese partners explain what is happening to some companies that are importing goods to Russia. So far, there are 6 companies affected by these new rules, large companies. 6 cases so far, but the number is growing fast. Well, friends, let's keep on watching. Looks like we are starting to watch. Well, we are watching the start of the grand finale of this mad circus that is called Putin's Russia. Carthago delenda est.